Musicians often ask me how they can develop improvisation chops. They are actually asking two related questions: how and what. Question number one is, how can I learn to play any melody I hear? Question number two is, what should I play? The how is called learning to play by ear. The what is called improvising. First, you need to learn how to play by ear so you'll be able to duplicate in all 12 keys any melody you hear. It may be a tune played by the guy sitting next to you. It may be something you've heard on a recording, or it may be music you've dreamed up in your own imagination. Regardless of where the melody originates, once you learn to play by ear, you'll be able to instantly recreate that tune on your axe in any key. My book, New Ear's Resolution, will teach you this skill. As you read through the book and play along with the 26 exercises on the accompanying CD, the synapses in your brain actually grow. That's right. Believe it or not, scientists have proven that playing music makes you smarter. Playing the 26 exercises contained in New Ear's Resolution will enable you to play the music you hear on your instrument. I call this ability hand-ear coordination. It is a powerful tool, and it's essential if you want to learn to improvise. Order New Ear's Resolution today, either as an instant download or as a physical book and CD at craigbuhler.com. The physical book and CD combo is only $19.99 plus tax and postage. The download is just $9.99. After you finish working through New Ear's Resolution, you will be able to play songs in all 12 keys like this. Rather than having to spend hours of hard work laboriously memorizing your repertoire, you'll be empowered to calculate each song in real time on the fly, as I did just now. Once you're able to reproduce pre-existing melodies accurately on your axe in all 12 keys, then it's time to begin creating your own improvisations. At this point, the question becomes, but what should I play? I spoke with an amazing classical musician. He's the first clarinetist in our symphony. He has a gorgeous tone and flawless technique, but he said to me, "Man, I'm lost without a chart in front of me." For many fine musicians, the prospect of playing without a chart seems daunting, as if you were walking out on stage naked. We need to overcome that fear. Let's start by getting familiar with what it feels like to improvise. We're going to start out in a very simple way. Rather than diving into the deep end and trying to reinvent the wheel, let's start by using some materials with which we are already very familiar. Let's start by playing a concert B-flat major scale, the one we all learned in beginning band class. It sounds something like this. That's okay, but it's not very interesting. So now, let's see if we can make that scale more imaginative, something a bit out of the ordinary. So, take a look at what I just played. I began with the conventional concert B-flat major scale played in eighth notes, just like we all learned in high school band. Then I took that same concert B flat major scale, but this time I played it with a triplet rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I broke it up into small segments. Here it is again. To my ear, that pattern is much more appealing than just hearing the straight scale. For one thing, those triplets are the basis of swing. We'll talk about how to swing in the lesson on rhythm. That reminds me of a really important question. How do we make our music sound interesting? What can I practice at home that will excite my audience in performance? What should my practice routine look like? What goals am I shooting for when I practice? What are the most important things I need to practice? Of course, it's crucial that you build your technique. Let's face it, all great jazz players have monster chops, right? However, chops alone are not everything. You need something else. Imagination. Imagination is just as important. We've all heard players who can run the changes at lightning speed, but they're not saying anything, right? They don't move us emotionally or spiritually. They're playing us dry and without imagination or passion. In order to impact your audience emotionally, to fill the listener with joy, you need to practice joy. What do I mean when I say you need to practice joy? Practicing is a balancing act between developing superior technique on the one hand and also engaging your creative imagination on the other hand. You really need both, chops and imagination. If you have killer chops, but your playing lacks joy and imagination and a winsome quality, your performances will not sparkle and your audience will quickly get bored. Of course, it goes without saying that you can have lots of fun playing, but your audience will not have much fun listening if you don't have any chops at all. So it takes both technique and imagination. By the same token, you also need both ability and confidence. Confidence without ability soon loses its credibility. We've all known players who think they're the greatest thing since Louis Armstrong, but in reality they sound more like Louie Louie. Confidence without ability is a bore. By contrast, ability without confidence is overly timid and tentative. Your level of confidence has to be realistic and it must be in balance with your competence. Okay, let's talk some more about how you get the feel of improvisation. Feeling confident behind the wheel, freeing yourself from slavery to the chart. I showed you how you could take a simple concert B-flat scale and transform it into something a little bit more interesting. Now let's do the same thing with some simple arpeggios. You form an arpeggio by playing every other note of the scale. Here's the scale. And here is an arpeggio created by playing every other note in that scale. That was my C scale, followed by a C major ninth arpeggio. We'll talk in much greater detail about how chords are created and given their names in the lesson on chords. For the time being, let's just spend a few moments messing around with some basic arpeggios built from that major scale. Remember, what we're doing right now is just getting comfortable with the feeling of improv. teaching our fingers to dance without need for the choreography of a chart. Think of a little kid exploring a new playground for the first time. By the way, why is it that little kids always want to go up the slide backwards? Have you ever noticed that? Every kid I've ever seen on a playground does that. They always want to go up the slide backwards. Why is that? Maybe there's a bit of Ornette Coleman in each of us, at least when we're young. Testing the limits, pushing the boundaries. That's the spirit we need to cultivate as we mature into master improvisers. So, here is my C major scale, which is concert B flat. And this time I'm going to play it from my low C up to my middle G so we have room to move. Okay, now I'm going to build several arpeggios by starting on various notes in the scale, first going up and then coming down for variety, and skipping every other note to form arpeggios like this. Remember, what we're doing here is getting comfortable with the notion of playing off the cuff, of improvising. I believe it's a mistake to start out, as many musicians do, by trying to run the changes, that is, by playing over the chords of a great standard like All the Things You Are. Students who dive right into a complex pursuit like that tend to get bogged down in hopeless morass of intricate detail, and they eventually become discouraged with the whole idea of improvisation because it seems so utterly complex and over their heads. Instead, let's pretend we're the kid on the playground, simply having fun, messing around with our acts and getting comfortable with the feel of improvising. Of course, we'll have a lot more to say about playing over chord changes in later lessons. We'll work through blues changes, the ubiquitous 2-5-1 chord progression, how to play over various types of chords, internal modulations, and piecing together a coherent story while working within the framework of a song. But that all comes later, once we feel comfortable experimenting with the notion of improv and testing the limits of our acts, our imagination, and our ability. There will also be several tools that we'll use to enhance expression, such as phrasing, timbre, dynamics, and articulation, which we'll explore in the lesson on expressiveness. But first, we need to become very, very comfortable with what it feels like to improvise. This is best accomplished using some simple musical materials. Tools such as scales, arpeggios, chromatics, skips, rhythmic, variety, and space, which is what we're talking about in this lesson. So far, we've looked at scales and arpeggios. Now let's experiment with some other useful tools. In contrast with the major scale, which uses 7 of the 12 pitches, the chromatic scale uses all 12. So here's the chromatic scale. I'm going to start from my G and go up to the higher G. That's the chromatic scale. It has 12 notes in it. There are a bunch of songs which illustrate ways in which we might use portions of the chromatic scale. Here are just a few. For example, check out the 2nd and 4th bars of Duke Ellington's classic, Sophisticated Lady. Then there's the New Orleans traditional tin roof blues. Or how about Hoagie Carmichael's Lazy Bones? Oh yeah, and then there's Tad Dameron's bebop anthem, Hot House. Here it is again. By the way, as an aside, Hot House is what's called a contrafact. A contrafact is a tune which uses the chord progression from another song. The chord progression for Hot House is derived from Cole Porter's tune called What Is This Thing Called Love? You can incorporate segments of the chromatic scale as part of your own improvisatory vocabulary. Ah, yes, improvisatory vocabulary. That's an important idea. As we work together, you're developing your own vocabulary in this new language called improvisation. You're learning a new language, enlarging your vocabulary and mastering the syntax of improvisation. And you're going to be able to communicate deep emotions to your audience in a profound way you never before dreamed possible. Your improvisatory vocabulary increases each time you pick up your axe to play. Here's a simple example of a lick I just dreamed up, which uses portions of the chromatic scale. In future lessons, we'll have a lot more to say about how you create melodic phrases like this. For now, just take a few moments to play that lick and ponder its shape. Here it is again. Okay, we've talked about scales, arpeggios, and chromatics. Now let's look at some larger skips. To illustrate one way you can use larger intervallic skips in your improvisations, here's a song called Rivers from my CD Capistrano Sessions. Rivers uses some unusual leaps to create a freewheeling outdoor feeling. Those leaps are highlighted on the chart shown here. As an improviser, you're creating a new musical composition on the fly. Effective improvisers use plenty of repetition to give a feeling of unity. They introduce enough variety to make the piece interesting, and they strive for a consistent delivery which produces a feeling of coherence. One way to add interesting variety to your improvisations is to use varied rhythms. Your rhythmic choices depend on the groove of the song. Two of the most useful grooves in straight-ahead jazz are what's called swing feel and bossa or Latin feel. In Latin feel, eighth notes are played evenly. Dot, 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 dot. By contrast, in swing feel, eighth notes are played in a long, short triplet pattern, as shown here. Da, 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 da. As an example of a wonderful rhythmic variety, that can be found in Thelonious Monk's fascinating composition, Evidence. as heard here from the phenomenal recording Monk Big Band and Quartet in Concerts, which is one of my personal all-time favorite albums, and it's now available on 2 CDs. How sparse and yet how inventive, unpredictable, and original is this Monk classic. To illustrate how you might add rhythmic interest to your improvisatory phrasing, look at the first 2 bars of Victor Young's When I Fall in Love. That simple melody consists of 4 quarter notes and a whole note. How many variations on those 2 measures do you suppose might be possible? Well, you could play it as a waltz or in 5/4 time. But here are a few of the ways you might try rephrasing that line in swing time. Finally, let's talk about a much neglected resource, space. It has been said that Miles Davis could express more in the notes he didn't play than some musicians could with the notes they did play. Miles once complained to John Coltrane that he played too many notes. Train responded that he didn't know how to stop. Miles snapped back, "Try taking the horn out of your mouth." Here's a solo played by an excellent student who was studying improvisation with me. It has many fine qualities. It follows the chord changes accurately and it swings. But notice that the rhythmic pattern is too predictable and it becomes a bit claustrophobic from a lack of space. As I play this solo, think about how you might improve it by adding a bit of space. So that was the solo as played by a guy that's just learning how to improvise. And you notice that it was a fairly coherent solo, but it got a little boring because of the repetitious rhythm. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Now here is how I imagine Miles might have played that same solo using the same notes, but adding some space. paring down the excess, searching for the essence. In this lesson, we've introduced many ideas. For sure, some of these notions are familiar to you. Others may be new. Hopefully, this discussion has piqued your curiosity and increased your enthusiasm to pursue this fascinating journey. Be sure to join me next time as we continue to explore the magnificent world of improvisation.